My title for this morning's service is perhaps a little controversial. You probably know the expression, gentle Jesus, meek and mild. Well, my sermon this morning is gentle Jesus, cheeky and wild. And before you run out of the church, I'm not going to say that Jesus sinned, so don't worry. But I'm going to maybe challenge preconceptions that you have about who Jesus was, what he was like, and how he acted. Before I get into Mark 11, I just wanted to do a quick review. I'm aware that a lot of you will have joined us in recent weeks and months. Probably a lot of you will be here since we, kind of before the summer, we did a whole section on Mark, then we had a summer break, and then we've come back to it. So probably a lot of you weren't even here for the first kind of block of sermons that we had on Mark. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of where we're at with Mark so far. So if we go to the next slide, this is Mark 1 to 10. It starts off with John the Baptist preparing the way for Jesus right at the beginning of chapter 1. And then Jesus getting baptized and then going off into the wilderness to face temptation. This is all before Jesus' ministry starts. And Mark kind of whistles through that very quickly. We're only up to verse 14 of chapter 1 by this point, where Jesus begins his ministry. Jesus chooses 12 disciples and is followed by many, many others as well. People kind of flock towards him because of his healings. Jesus healed many, blind, paralytic, leprous, dead, and also performed many miracles. Jesus fed 5,000, fed 4,000. He calmed storms. He walked on water. These are all things that we've looked at in Mark so far. Jesus taught the crowd, often using parables to explain what he meant, to make it kind of easier for people to understand or to engage people and relate to them. And Jesus also upset the Pharisees, which we're going to be looking a little bit more at today. Jesus also foretells his death and resurrection, much to the shock and displeasure, I think, of some of his disciples. But actually, Jesus says what's going to happen, what's going to come. And that kind of leads us into Mark 11. Mark 11 is kind of the beginning of the end. So the end is in sight. Jesus knows what he's called to. He knows that actually he is going to die. And this almost is the beginning of that. This is Jesus now entering Jerusalem. This is kind of the beginning of the end of his ministry, should I say, not the beginning of the end of Jesus, obviously, but this is the coming towards the end of his ministry on earth. And I'm not actually going to look at the first section of Mark. Turn to Mark 11 if you've got your Bibles with you, by the way. I'm not going to look at the first little section of Mark 11. It's something that probably many of you will have heard preached on before, and it's the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. But just to quickly summarize that, Jesus asks his disciples to go and to get a donkey, which is tied up. The disciples bring that to him, and as he rides into Jerusalem on the donkey, there are many people around laying down palm tree branches and their cloaks, and shouting, "Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming King of our father David. Hosanna in the highest." So the kind of people in front of him and behind him, all around him, many of them will be people who probably he's healed along the way, people who recognize that this is someone sent from God. Some of them may be just curious that a celebrity has come to town and they want to kind of celebrate in this joyous occasion. But actually this whole section is pointing towards Jesus as King. And as I say, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on that. That's a whole sermon in itself. But I feel like God's led me really to speak on the next section in Mark 11. But I just wanted to kind of summarize that for you. So Jesus is coming into Jerusalem at this point. And people already are aware of who he is and will know who he is and will have heard of him probably from what he's been doing around. Before I go into the bit in Mark that I want to look at, I'm going to share with you our core value for today, which is selfless, sacrificial, countercultural love for people. In our Explore group, if you're part of a church, you may hopefully will be part of an Explore group, which is a midweek group. If you're not and you'd like to be, then again, speak to somebody at the Connection Zone. We'd love for you to join us midweek to share life with one another and to encourage one another. Our Explore group, a couple of weeks ago, we looked at the core values of the church, so what we believe as a church. And somebody kind of questioned which value they think would be the one that was most commonly used on a Sunday morning. And we had a little bit of a debate about it. But I think this one would be up there, certainly. This is one that we speak about a lot. It's central to who we are, as are all the core values. But let me read this to you. We want to display our love for God by loving people, all people. Jesus Christ transforms our understanding of what it is to live a life of giving, serving, and caring, and the Holy Spirit empowers such a life. As a Christ-like community, we seek to create counterculture by selflessly loving and practically serving people of any age and every background in our town and beyond. So let's dive into Mark chapter 11, starting at verse 12. On the following day, when Jesus came from Bethany, he was hungry, and seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to see if he could find anything on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. And he said to it, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples heard it. And they came to Jerusalem, and he entered the temple and began to drive out those who sold and who bought in the temple. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. And he would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. And he was teaching them and saying to them, "Is it not written, 'My house should be called a house of prayer for all the nations'? But you have made it a den of robbers." And the chief priests and the scribes heard it and were seeking a way to destroy him, for they feared him, because all the crowd was astonished at his teaching. And when evening came, they went out of the city. I'm going to carry on from there in a little bit, but I just wanted to talk to you about this bit first. Throughout Mark, there are kind of these sections known as Markan sandwiches, which is basically where Mark explores an idea or a theme or a story, then goes off and talks about something else, and then comes back to that idea or theme or story. And this is kind of a fig sandwich, which sounds pretty disgusting to me. But what I'm going to do is to concentrate on the middle bit first, and then go back to the outside bit. So the middle bit generally is the focus, the bit which has the main point, and the other bits outside it kind of point to that and try and elaborate and explain it a bit more. So let me just talk to you a little bit. I'm going to move this. Let me just talk to you a little bit about the temple. So the temple was a place where obviously people came to worship God, to pray, and to honor God. It was set in Jerusalem, and there were many different kind of levels of access within the temple. So right in the very center is the Holy of Holies, where the chief priest was able to enter once a year to be right in the presence of God. And then outside of that was courts for maybe like the Jewish leaders and the rulers. And then as you kind of go further out, there's kind of less restricted levels of access. So you'd have one for all the Jews, and then kind of another court outside for the women, and then right on the outside would be where the Gentiles, where the non-Jews would be allowed to come and to pray and to worship God. And so some of these kind of people would maybe just be curious about who is the God of the Jewish faith. Others maybe will have turned from their old way of life and wanted to start to follow the God of the Bible. But these were non-Jewish people who would be in this outside court section. And this is where the business was taking place. It's no surprise, really. They don't want kind of all of this buying and selling to be happening where the important people are, kind of in the center of the temple. But actually, it's fine for it to be taking place on the outside, where only the Gentiles are. That's fine. It's actually not, but that's kind of what was happening. People were going there, and there were animals being sold for animal sacrifice. People would sacrifice animals to atone for their sins, and people could buy animals there. But this wasn't just that wasn't the source of Jesus' anger. Jesus wasn't angry at them just because they were selling animals to sacrifice. That was fine. It was actually because they turned the whole thing, this place of worship, into a business venture, a business enterprise. And not just that, but they were doing it at an extortionate rate. So it wasn't just the case that they turn up and just pay a reasonable price. It's kind of like if you go to the football stadium in Watford, you may well go to Andy Clark's kiosk to buy yourself a cup of coffee and a pie. I think he's out with an example. And then after having queued for many, many minutes to get to the front of the queue, you suddenly look at the price list and realize it's rather more than you expected. But they can sort of charge what they want because they're the only competition. You can't bring food or drink into most kind of stadiums now. And so you generally have to buy what they have on sale, and they can charge more or less what they want because they know people will pay it because they've got no alternative. And that's what was going on here. So there was no real kind of competition. People would be traveling from miles around to come to worship at the temple, and they wouldn't be able to bring animals with them on their journey. It would just be kind of impractical. So they turn up at the temple and then suddenly face these extortionate prices. And not just that, but also there would be a temple tax that they'd have to pay. And they couldn't just pay with their regular money. Oh, no, obviously not. They all have to exchange their money in order to be able to pay the temple tax. And guess what? Again, extortionate exchange rates. So basically, what's going on here is the people are being ripped off, and the Gentiles are kind of facing the worst of that. And so you'd kind of think, well, surely the high priest wouldn't be happy about this. Surely kind of the Jewish leaders would see what was going on and, be outraged that this was happening. But the high priests were a part of this as well. The high priests would be getting a cut of what was being made in the temple. Obviously, it's their temple, so they would be making money from this as well. So they had no objection to what was taking place, what was going on. And not just that, but these people were coming in and looking at the Jewish faith. So compare that, if you will, to our church. Imagine that initially we only let kind of non-Christians and visitors, they can't come in here because this is like for the Christians, this is the main bit. They have to stay out in like the foyer area. And then teas and coffees, they can have teas and coffees. Just need to exchange a little bit of money with us first. £1 for 10 X1. That's great. It's 150 X1 for a cup of coffee. You get the idea that these people who should have been almost taken and welcomed were actually being extorted, put out on the fringes. And we as a church, it's free to come here. We long to welcome everyone who comes through our doors. We don't charge for coming in this morning. We don't charge for teas and coffees. We don't charge for most of our events. Occasionally there's some events which cost a lot of money and we need to have a charge. But generally speaking, what we put on as a church is free. It's free for people to come along. But of course it's not free in reality. It's paid for by people who are kind of committed members of the church. But we want, as a church, for there to be no barriers, nothing stopping people to investigate the Christian faith, to find out about who is Jesus, to look to God. And you may have kind of noticed when we kind of pass around the purple buckets that they're generally quite empty. And there's a reason for that. Most of the regular members of X1 give by gift aid. They give kind of through online banking or standing order or whatever else. And I just wanted to thank you as people who do that, if you're somebody who does that or who gives on a regular basis to the work of X1. Thank you so much. That really is amazing, and it means that we're able to do these things, to reach out to our community, which I'm going to be talking about a little later, and to really welcome non-Christians and to make it a place where they can come and not have to pay to be here. So thank you for that. And if you would like to give by standing order, if that's something that you'd like to set up, then again, that's something you can do over in the connection zone. Come and speak to one of the connection guys later on. But yeah, there's an option to do that. So basically, all this is to make the point that Jesus was angry at what was going on. What was going on was not just facilitating people to worship God, it was ripping them off, and Jesus was not pleased about it. So we sometimes have this idea of gentle Jesus, meek and mild, someone who was kind of always polite, always tolerant of other people, always kind of nice, always looking to be polite. But really, does that fit into what we read here? So, get out! Take your pigeons and go, okay? This is meant to be a house of prayer, and you've turned it into a den of robbers. That was quite good fun. I'm not even going to pick those up. Somebody else can do it. Jesus caused quite a stir when he's doing this. He was knocking things over, denying people. Sue's there. Sorry, Sue. Sorry. Denying people access to the temple. He was making accusations, saying to people, "You've made this a den of robbers." This was significant. This isn't just him saying, "You really shouldn't be doing that." He was in there and he was stopping people, physically stopping people from carrying on this business, such that the chief priests later in this passage sought a way to destroy him. Jesus is causing such a controversy, such a stir. He's stopping their way of doing things from going ahead, and they want to stop him. Imagine how the disciples are feeling at this time. They're watching Jesus going, "What are you doing? You are going to get yourself killed." But was Jesus off the rails? Was he in the wrong? No, because his anger was righteous anger. At university, I played for a football team called the La-di-Dahs. I didn't come up with a name. We each had a name on our shirt that was kind of a nickname. I was Billy Elliot because I played football in a rather ballet style, perhaps. It wasn't a nickname that I suggested. But we used to play six-a-side on AstroTurf like every Friday evening. And this one time we played against this team, and one of the rules was that there's no slide tackling allowed. So you're not allowed to slide in to try and win the ball, just because it was too dangerous. They're quite small pitches, and yeah, it's just one of the rules of the game. And we came up against this team, and this guy just seemed to completely ignore that fact. He came in sliding in, 3 or 4 times, and I said to him, like, "This is, mate, come on, there's no slide tackles allowed. This is none." But he ignored me, didn't really seem to care. A couple more slide challenges. He put in one that actually nearly injured one of our players, and I was like, "This is not on. I'm going to have to show him that this isn't right." So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, so the next time he comes in sliding in, I'm just going to let him know that this is not okay. This is not acceptable. And obviously he did come in slide tackling again. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll just walk past him. And obviously, if I just give him a little flick with my foot, then he's going to know that, the slide tackling thing is not allowed. So as I kind of went past, sort of flicked out my foot, carried on going, and was thinking, that was a little harder than I intended it to be. That was more or less an outright kick. At which point I looked back, and he was getting up rather quickly and starting to come towards me very fast. So my friends at this point all kind of came around me to protect me. And I realized that I'd made an error of judgment and allowed my kind of anger to get the better of me. So much so, in fact, that if you go to the next picture, my friend, who's a member of the football team as well, sent me this picture on... So this is Billy Elliot, La-di-Dahs, likes to kick people when lying on the floor injured. But he wasn't injured, I'd like to just point out, that's an exaggeration. He's even drawn people booing, like a crowd booing me. But it was quite a joke to them because, yeah, it was sort of out of character for me to do it, I'd like to point out. But this was a case where, in my mind, I could have justified that this was righteous anger. This guy was breaking the rules. He needed to actually know that what he was doing wasn't right. And so I take matters into my own hands and, through my anger, I end up running away like a child. But what is righteous anger? My anger wasn't righteous, but why? Throughout Scripture, there are warnings that anger leads to sin, as clearly demonstrated by me. Yet this is clearly not always the case. Otherwise, Jesus would be sinning in this passage. Other examples of righteous anger are Nehemiah, who gets upset when hearing that the wealthy in Israel are exploiting the poor. And he says, "Then I was very angry when I heard these words." That's Nehemiah 5:6. Also, David is often angry in the Psalms about his enemies that do not fear God and do not worship God as they should. So if we look at the next section, here are another few verses that talk about anger. So the first one we've already looked at. But there are other verses that talk about anger, and talk about anger in a way that permits it, but comes with warnings attached. It says, "Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger." It's Ephesians 4:26. Why? Why don't let the sun go down on your anger? Because that will likely lead to resentment and to sin later on. "Let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger, for the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God." Again, why? Because if you're quick to anger, then generally speaking, it's because of something that's been done to you, somewhere that you're irate, and you're likely to use that to then get retribution and to sin. You should be slow to anger. But it does say the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. So what kind of anger does produce the righteousness of God? Righteous anger. And there's this one as well, which I didn't say. Jesus looked around at them with anger, grieved at their hardness of heart. So that's something that we've already looked at in Mark previously. So clearly there are cases where anger can be right and can be just. So what are they? So I've just kind of written a definition of that. I've kind of taken it from a couple of different sources. One's just from our core value and one from somewhere else. But ultimately, if our outrage results in selfless, sacrificial, countercultural love for people, which prompts action to restore people into loving, healing relationship with Jesus Christ, then it is righteous anger. Often we simply need to ask ourselves the question, is my motive to be right or to be righteous? Usually we get angry because people don't respect our rights. So in that game, I was angry that the other guy just was having no respect for us whatsoever, clearly wasn't respecting our rights not to be slide tackled. And also, people, get angry a lot, probably in their cars, is maybe more than anywhere else in this country. Because people, he just cut me up. Did you see that? He just came out in front of me. Does he not know who I am? I drive a green Polo. What is he thinking? I actually do drive it's ridiculous, isn't it? But it's the anger is because something's been done to us and our rights haven't been respected. But actually, that's different to righteous anger. So righteous anger should motivate us to care for others. We should be righteously angry at things in the world that are not right, not as God intended them to be. We should be righteously angry for God's name when God is not being respected as he should be. As Christ followers, we should get upset over sin. Evils such as abuse, racism, pornography, child sex trafficking should incense us. The fact that there are parts of the world who still don't have clean running water, despite the fact that we have the skills and the resources in order to do that, should make us sick as Christians. The fact that even in the UK, poverty is still a reality and that there are hundreds, maybe thousands of families who needlessly go hungry every day should make us righteously angry. And that should prompt actions. And actually, Christians are usually at the forefront of charities that are being set up, of these initiatives that take place to try and prevent these things. There's a food bank that just launched in Watford. I mentioned it last week. That is exactly for this reason. There are people who are kind of on the poverty line who genuinely don't have the money to feed their families. And so Food Bank has been set up in Watford as an emergency kind of thing for people who need kind of emergency food, basically. So 3 days worth of food, maybe before their benefits kick in, or maybe if they've just lost a job. But yeah, that is in place in order to try and counter this. Again, I just want to read the core value that I read earlier. We want to display our love for God by loving people, all people. Jesus Christ transforms our understanding of what it is to live a life of giving, serving, and caring, and the Holy Spirit empowers such a life. As a Christ-like community, we seek to create counterculture by selflessly loving and practically serving people of any age and every background in our town and beyond. I don't think we're there yet as a church. I don't think that we are practically loving and serving people of any age and every background in our town. Not yet. certainly not beyond that. There was a group of us that went away last weekend to an event called Jubilee Plus, which was put on at another New Frontiers church, which basically highlighted different social action initiatives that you can get involved with, really. And as a kind of leadership team, and as a number of other of you have been praying in recent weeks and months about where God is leading us as a church to commit our time and our resources and our energies in serving our community and reaching out to the needs of our town. And that's something that is going to be taking a step up in the next few weeks. We're going to be meeting together to discuss what it is that we can get involved in. And if you are righteously angry about something, if there is something that stirs your heart, if there is something that you can see is an injustice in our town, in our nation, that you really have a heart for, please do share that with the leadership team. Please do come and tell us, this is something that I really want to get involved in. This is something, an area where I feel we as a church could really get involved and really make a difference. Then please do share that with us. As followers of Jesus, we should be motivated to action by compassion in the same way that Jesus was. If your heart has been transformed by Jesus Christ, then it's only natural that we should want to reach out to our community and to serve others in the same way. The local church really is the hope of the world. We've said it here from the pulpit before, but it's true that the local church is the hope of the world. Again, at this event last week, they showed a map of an African country. I can't remember which one, but they showed where kind of the local hospitals and the kind of local health points were, and they were kind of scattered throughout this country, and were very inaccessible to a lot of people. And then they put up a map of where all of the local churches were, and it just covered the entire country. And you think if each of those churches take seriously the responsibility to reach out to their community, then they can really have a significant impact in their town. And it's the same for all of us. If just the churches in Watford really took this seriously, how can we support and impact and reach out to our town? Then we would have a massive impact. So let's carry on in Mark 11, looking now from verse 20 onwards. As they passed by in the morning, they saw the fig tree withered away to its roots. And Peter remembered and said to him, "Rabbi, look, the fig tree you cursed has withered." And Jesus answered them, "Have faith in God. Truly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, 'Be taken up and thrown into the sea,' and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will come to pass, it will be done for him. Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. And whenever you stand praying, forgive if you have anything against anyone, so that your Father who is in heaven may forgive you your trespasses." I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, which will probably upset one or two of you. Again, there is at least a whole sermon in this as well. But I just wanted to look at this and just explain how that relates to what was talked about with the fig tree earlier and how it relates to the Pharisees as well. So Jesus comes across this fig tree, and it's got leaves on it. And what that meant for fig trees, so I've learned, is that actually if it's got leaves on it, it should also be producing fruit at this point. The fruit will come first, and then the leaves come after, and then the fruit kind of slowly ripens. So Jesus comes up to this fig tree which is in leaf, expecting to find fruit, expecting there should be fruit on there, and actually finds none. And this is a visual parable, as it were. It's an enacted parable. He's making a point to the disciples in this, in cursing the fig tree, that actually this fig tree has the appearance, has the impression of being fruit-bearing, but then on closer inspection, when you come up to it, actually there is no fruit. And that relates to the Pharisees and the Jewish leaders, because they were more concerned with their appearance, how it looked to other people looking into the temple, looking into the way that things are being done, that they are righteous and holy. They've added a number of laws to the laws that they've got just to make sure that absolutely that they're not sinning. But actually, there's no fruit. On closer inspection, yes, they appear to be holy and righteous from a distance, but when you get close, when you really start to engage with them, you realize that there is no fruit to their lives. Because there is no love, there is no compassion, there is no desire to serve the other, only self-righteousness, only kind of wanting to appear to be right to others. there's a real kind of challenge for us as individuals and as a church in this sense. So the Pharisees, when they actually encounter God, when they actually encounter the living God in the form of Jesus as a man, not only do they not recognize him as God, not only do they actually disregard him, but they actually go one step further and end up killing him and plotting how they can bring his downfall. So how is that possible? How are people who supposedly are meant to be helping people and aiding people to engage with God, when they actually encounter God, they end up killing him? Because there is no fruit in their hearts. They're not really transformed by the gospel. He's undermined their authority and shattered their illusion of holiness. While the Pharisees brought in more rules and laws, Jesus came to bring freedom, true freedom and relationship with God. I just want to encourage you, don't fall into the trap of wanting to be seen to be holy, wanting to be seen to be righteous and pure and a good Christian. Actually, what's more important is the fruit of your life, having your heart transformed by the gospel, being continually changed to be more like Christ. There's an individual and a corporate challenge here. So for you individually, do you come here kind of to church to be seen at church, or actually to meet with God? Do you read Christian books and learn scripture in order to kind of show off essentially, or to kind of be seen to be righteous, or to actually let those words change your heart? Do you go to prayer meetings because others will see you there, or because you genuinely want to seek God's heart and want to pray into what we're involved in as a church? Are we as a church more concerned with how we're perceived outside than actually kind of bearing fruit? Do we want to be seen to be attractive and welcoming, but actually we're not engaging people with our needs where they're actually at? And do we actually genuinely want to see lives transformed by the power of the gospel in our town? And I think, again, this is something that we need to kind of step up. We need to be reaching our town more than we are, X1. I think we're doing okay at the moment, but we are going to be next year focusing a lot more on evangelism and a lot more on reaching the needs of our town, because we need to reach out to others, not just to be seen to be doing the right thing, but actually to go out and to see fruit. So let's finish off Mark 11 with the last kind of section. This is the authority of Jesus challenged. And they came again to Jerusalem, and as he was walking in the temple, the chief priests and the scribes and the elders came to him, and they said to him, "By what authority are you doing these things? Or who gave you this authority to do them?" Jesus said to them, "I will ask you one question. Answer me, and I will tell you by what authority I do these things. Was the baptism of John from heaven or from man? Answer me." So what's going on here is they've obviously got together. They thought, right, what's the very best question that we can ask Jesus to try and catch him out? What can we do to try and trick him into kind of claiming to be God, and then we can kill him, or we can arrest him and crucify him. So they ask, well, okay, we could ask about authority, because if he says that he's getting his authority from God, then actually that's blasphemous. But if he says it's not from God, then the crowd will ignore him and stop following him. And Jesus knows their heart. Jesus knows that they're coming to him not to genuinely find answers, but just to trick him. And this is his cheeky response in a way, but actually it's not that cheeky, because what they were doing was cheeky, really. But he says to them this: "I will ask you a question." So in other words, if you answer my question, then I'll answer your question. Was the baptism of John from heaven or from man? And then it says, they discuss with one another. If we say from heaven, he will say, "Why then did you not believe him?" But if we say from man, but shall we say from man, they were afraid of the people, for they all held that John really was a prophet. So there's a big crowd probably overhearing this. The tension in the air would have been palpable. They'll have seen these Jewish leaders coming out to confront Jesus, to kind of say, "Oi, what are you doing?" type thing. And so there's a crowd watching this, like, waiting to hear what Jesus' response will be. And Jesus knows this, and Jesus knows that actually the crowd, they held John in very high regard, John in very high esteem, as a man that was sent from God. And so he knows that if he asks the Jewish leaders, that they can't say that John's authority was from God, because then Jesus could say, well, then why didn't you listen to him? John talked about me as being better, as being greater than him. And if they say that it wasn't from God, then the crowd will basically lynch the Jewish leaders, because they know that the crowd loves John. And so they have a little discussion. They get together and like, okay, what are we going to answer? We need to give them a good answer. And then maybe one of them pipes up and is like, oh, I know, I've got an idea. Jesus, we don't know. And that's their response to Jesus. So if you read, they answered Jesus, we do not know, simply that. And Jesus said to them, neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. The truth is that they didn't really want to know the answer to that question. They just wanted to catch Jesus out. But Jesus knowing this just diffuses the situation. But in some ways he does, and in some ways he probably aggravates the Pharisees more. He knows that this is coming towards the end of his ministry, and actually that he is going to end up dying on a cross. And yet he doesn't let that stop him. He doesn't kind of run away from this situation. He doesn't sort of go into the temple, turn over the tables, and then do a roadrunner act and just get out there really quick. He sticks around and continues to teach the people, even though he knows that these Jewish leaders and Pharisees are going to come, they're going to oppose him, they're going to oppose his teaching, and that actually that is going to result in his death. So again, I just wanted to kind of encourage us and make us aware that if we're genuinely going to act on our righteous anger, if we're going to try to restore people to healthy relationship with God, then we should expect opposition. If you try to relieve people from their situation of poverty or a cycle of debt, so if you try and stop the banks from being able to crush people with crippling repayments, then guess what? There's going to be opposition to that, because you're going to be costing people money. If you try to tackle child slavery, people trafficking, pornography, then there's going to be significant opposition to that, because again, you're going to be costing people a lot of money. And it's not just money. If you question people's authority, if we as a church try to have a greater impact in our town than the politicians, they're probably not going to be that pleased about that. We as a church, though, are going to be more intentional about serving our town and our community in the coming months, and we're going to push through. So a while ago, over a year ago, we approached the mayor about what can we do in our town, and there was a lot of red tape basically stopping us from doing anything, because we had to have kind of qualified people to do anything really. But we've kind of taken a decision this time that we're actually not going to let that stop us. We're not going to let any kind of obstacles that we might face stop us from doing that. And we should expect persecution if we're going to genuinely try to take our town for Christ, if we want the church to be the prominent force in our town. Are we ready for that? We can live Christ-like lives because of what Christ did for us. And I just wanted to kind of finish by saying why Jesus is greater than the temple. So this has been all about the temple so far, Jesus in the temple and kind of the Jewish leaders in the temple, Jesus causing a stir there. But Jesus didn't come just to improve the temple. Jesus didn't come just to try and make it a better place for the Gentiles or a better place for people and to stop some of the corruption. He came to replace the temple, and Jesus is a greater temple. The temple was a place where people went to meet with God. They had to travel from miles around to come to meet with God. Now that Jesus is that person, through Jesus, we can have relationship with God anywhere and anytime. The temple was a place where people went to be made right with God. Now we are made right with God through faith in Jesus Christ. The temple was a place where people went to be close to God. Now through Jesus we have direct access to God at any time and any place in our lives. The temple was a place where people made sacrifices for their sins. Jesus became a sacrifice for us once and for all time, so that we no longer have to make sacrifices on a regular basis. Jesus paid the price for us for all time. The center of our faith is not a place, but a person. Jesus is the greater temple. and should be our motivation and our hope and joy to serving our town.